Yeah.
In the specimen that was more recently found that was flattened laterally and then you showed like the reconstructed view, I noticed one area you had marked as mystery mass.
Oh, yeah.
Thought any more about what might that be?
Maybe we can go back to that. Let me go back a few. Yeah, that's one of these soft tissue things we think. We haven't prepared it away. You know, if we prepared it away, you'd see more bone. Keep going. Keep going. I think. Keep going. There. That's too far. Yeah, the mystery mass. That's. I'm glad you pointed that out because we're not really sure what that is, but it seems to be organic material. You know, it's probably not cartilage because it seems to be outside of the bone part. It may actually be skin or something like that. We didn't want to prepare it away to expose that complete right posteroventrolateral plate because it's something unique. And again, if you fully prepare things, you lose that information. So I don't know what it is exactly, but maybe somebody in the future will know. And it's important to preserve that data.
Was there a fin near that area?
There was actually, and maybe we are talking about the end of a fin. I don't know. That's a good thing to investigate. Remember, here's the ossified cartilage elements of the base of the fin. Maybe we are talking about the distal end of the fin there wrapping around. I don't know. That's a good suggestion. I'll have to see. I think probably part of it was prepared away until we sort of realized, oh my God, what is this? And stopped and left it there.
So you don't really think
so
it was inside? It could possibly.
No, this is on the outside of his hand. So it still is a mystery mass.
Can you say anything about the size of the brain in these fish as opposed to like sharks or modern bony fishes?
You know, I can't, but maybe somebody can. If you look at the interior, and I don't have a slide of this, but the interior of the cephalic shield, you do see structures that may be related to the brain case and such. The problem is once you go beneath that, everything is cartilaginous and has not typically been preserved. Now, again, with specimens like this that are not fully prepared out, it might be possible as technology advances to CAT scan that area, for instance, and maybe find that there is some preserved cartilage in there that would give us more information on the neuroanatomy. Other fish we do know something about them in other areas where they're better preserved and people have been able to section them or scan them or something. But as far as arthrodires, I'm not aware of much research in that area. There's a lot we don't know about these things.
Could you talk a little bit about the mineralization of these bone materials? Were they, for example, hydroxylapatite like we would expect in other bones? And is that material still there, or has it all been turned to silica? Can you take thin sections and learn something about relationships just from the fine structure of bone?
Yeah, that's a very good question. They are true bone. They're hydroxylapatite. And bone, which is the mineral component, the inorganic mineral framework of bone. Bone also has organic constituents, proteins, like collagen and things like that. And those are typically lost in the fossilization process. But that original mineralogical framework remains. And that's why fossil bones are often very brittle. They don't have the remaining proteins to give them some flexibility, but that old, slightly altered, granted mineralogical constituent still exists. And that's, now, in addition to that, of course, they are permineralized. So they're where the proteins were, where those pore spaces are after decomposition, there is infiltration of minerals for permineralization and fossilization. In this case, it would be calcium carbonate. Silicified their carbonate. But yes, so since you have the bone structure still present, you can section them and do histological studies. It's not something I've done. It's not something I'm particularly knowledgeable about. But I believe people have looked at arthrodire bone and made some general comments about them. I think it's probably an area that's ripe for research. Right. Yeah. Nobody's been looking at it recently, certainly. Yeah.
So how do these self-sharpening plates work? I mean, was the bone always regenerating, and how do they prevent infection and such?
Yeah, it's really, they're very dense, of course. Most of the bones are quite dense, but particularly in the jaw elements. They're really dense, and there's not much in, there is internal structure, but there's not a lot of pore space or anything in those front ones. And they're grinding against each other like a pair of self-sharpening scissors. Maybe they did from time to time get infected. I've never seen evidence of it, but if one surveyed collections, maybe you would see some of that. I think there are examples of injuries. We know that there are examples of things that have been attacked and died. I wouldn't be surprised if you find healed injuries in some of these animals. And being a living organism, they would be subject to pathogens just like anything else. So maybe if one got out there and had a big enough sample size and looked at it, you might find some things like that. But really, these are bony plates and just grinding past one another, self-sharpening, keeping a very flat, sharp edge on these bones. And I pointed out in the jaw, the small jaw early on, there are little denticles typically in the back of the jaws when they're young. Those are ground away as they get older. And as the bones do constantly reform, just like any other bone, and reshape as the thing grows.
Do you have a fairly complete growth series of these? You mentioned that you find smaller.
Yeah, there is. We don't at Cincinnati, but there are. If you surveyed them all, you could see a pretty good growth series. Yeah, everything from jaws about maybe this big to who knows exactly how big the largest one would be.
Do they have similar proportions?
They do. They're really, they're not something that change a lot as they age. A small Dunkleosteus looks pretty much like a large one, but that's, fish are that way. Fish in the broad sense are that way too. Sharks and things. They don't go through the extreme proportional changes that mammals do, for instance.
Are the plates to strengthen the offensive biting strength of this creature, of the Dunkleosteus, or are they to protect the Dunkleosteus from attack?
I would say they do both things, but the primary purpose phylogenetically, I think, would have been for protection, because we see all of these arthrodires, even the ones that aren't big predators with these jaws, had those same bony plates, right? So presumably it's for protection from other creatures. But when you get to a top predator like Dunkleosteus, a very derived arthrodire, certainly those stout, dense bones would provide good support for musculature and assist in the force of the bite, for instance. There was a recent study a couple of years ago trying to model the bite force in Dunkleosteus. And I'm not a biophysicist, really, so it's hard for me to sort of assess the work. It looked like it was a good study. And they estimated 8,000 newtons, which is 4,400 pounds per square inch, I think, of force in the bite. So that's, like a Tyrannosaurus or something like that. So and some of the bones that I have, we've got one median dorsal bone plate, which is back here, that has been folded in half. It's got a bite mark on both sides. So one of these things was just bitten right in half by a large one. Yeah, really interesting.
Glen, are there any Dunkleosteus in that Australian arthrodire fauna, the goat?
No. There are arthrodires, but there is not Dunkleosteus. Everything there, that to my knowledge, is much smaller, more like Cacosteus.
Yeah, there are Cacosteus.
Oh yeah. Well, there's things like Cacosteus eastmanosteus and similar. I don't know. I think there is a Cacosteus species, but there's nothing as big that I'm aware of out there. Maybe they were there and aren't being preserved for some reason. I don't know. One more. Well, I see one over here. Was there a question over here? No? Okay.
Do you have any idea of the lifespan?
No. That's probably something one could determine, maybe, again, by histological studies, maybe sectioning the bone. There might be a way to determine that. Some bones in some organisms, certain bones that aren't constantly reforming, do preserve a record of annual growth, much like tree rings. And that's sort of a recent discovery. And it's been used to age dinosaurs in recent years. I don't think anyone's done that work on these things, so I really couldn't say. One could estimate, if not exact age, rates of growth probably. Did they grow at a constant rate? Did they grow very rapidly when they were young and then slow down? Probably like most primitive vertebrates, lower vertebrates, a more or less constant rate of growth, I would think. All right, well, thanks for your attention. I appreciate it.